Hey and welcome all to today's video. My name is Joseph. I hope everyone's doing well. So, in today's video, I'll be covering the second part to the health, stamina, and mana system, but this time I'll be using sprites and explaining to you guys how that works. Before I get into that, just need to say you guys are awesome. You have no clue. You keep blowing my mind with stuff that you keep doing on the channel. In saying that, I've got a second thing here. I may have gone a tad overboard with this. You'll see why in a moment. I'll be interested to see if you guys pick this up, because I'll put it in the Google Drive, and I would like to see the potential highest score you guys can get. This will make sense in a moment. Okay, let's get into it. So, what I've created here is a partially operational game with barrels. Yes, I know they're very shittily drawn. And what will happen is when you get hit, for example, you get a HP bar that shows up, and if you get hit more, starts to decrease. Now, if I keep getting hit, you'll see it keeps decreasing. And it will eventually go all the way down, and you can see it goes to red. It will reset. So if I use my mana, you can see I've got a mana bar, like so. And then the last part to what I've created here is when you're sprinting, you get these little dots under your cursor. So each of these have different ways of being programmed. So the sprint component is purely written in GameMaker language. The mana bar is half a sprite and half GameMaker language, and the health bar is full sprite functionality. So let's get in and take a quick look at this. So if I jump to my events, so I've had to add some new stuff, some bits and pieces to all of this. So this is kind of similar to the original one I put up yesterday, the day before yesterday. This one here takes it a step further. So if you take a look here, you can see I've got things like a health color selector that basically sets an array to the different colors. I've got a HP fade delay and a fade, so that's just to do with how it fades out. In my mana, I've got the same thing, so I've got a fade function. And then in my stamina, I've got another color array in there as well. So, let's take a look at the programming. So if I come in here, and this will look partially similar to what I had programmed the other day, and partially not. Only because I've expanded upon the programming. So here, for example, when the player takes damage and the health reduces between 0 and 20, it works out that it needs to use my selector 0, which is the red color. And as it works up the range, it will then work out what color you need to use. So it's pretty much just selecting between these brackets. This is the health. Just as a tip, when you set these up, don't put that like that, because the issue is if you go greater than or equal to 0 and less than or equal to 20, that means when we get to the second bracket here, we need to go like this, because we need to make a distinction between each level. So it's actually easier just to say less than 20, because that means you can go equal to 20 up here. So basically, this just goes down the line. It just checks each of the states. In the fade function here, so what it looks at is when you get hit, there's a fade setting that gets applied, and I'll show you that because it's kept in the barrel function. The fade delay, and then once that's hit 0, it will then allow you to fade out the actual sprite. So basically, this is a delay to then allow the fade to happen, so you've still got some level of interactivity. You can still visually see what's going on, because anything sprite design, you have to always think about the player in mind. The next part here is just the mana. So this is the same mana function as I had created before, except now I add a fade function. And then if I scroll down here, that's my mana cooldowns. And in here, what I've done is I've actually created a little extra function using... oops, sorry, I should cover the fade first. So that's the fade there. So that's nothing ultra fancy. It just basically says if the fade is not equal to 0 and my mana is not at max, don't fade. And if these criteria are met, start to fade. The next step here is I use the shift key, and I'm actually going to boost that a little bit. let's actually go by 3 times. This will actually let you regenerate mana if you're not sprinting and standing on the spot by holding down the shift key. So I've now used shift key to use both for sprinting and for mana regeneration. This is pretty stock standard, so this just, again, adds a stamina fade to my stamina bar. And then that gets added to each of the 4 directions. Under my stamina, you can see all I've done that's a little bit different is added my stamina fade, and then the same kind of principle for colors. So again, nothing too overly complicated. In the draw function, this is where things can get a little bit more confusing, and I'll run you guys through that. So if I expand this out, oh, no, I need that. I keep forgetting that. So you'll see here that I've got a draw self, which is nothing fancy, and I just set some temporary values. So this is just used to configure where I want positioning to go. I've still got that health repair thing to stop it from glitching out a little bit, which shouldn't actually be too much of an issue, but I'm just going to leave it there for a safeguard. Then I'm using a function called sprite extra, which gives me extra functions in my sprite, which is important. Because if I show you my health bar, for example, you're going to notice something odd about it. My health bar is actually grey. And what basically happens is I use the exact medium of the line grey, and then I can impose a colour on it. So GameMaker will allow a colour to filter through. So if I come back up here, you'll see that I set my sprite, and then instead of doing the pixel modification, I actually use the same percentile value, and then I base it on the amount of frames in my image. So I can do the same thing and calculate what frame I should be at using this value here. The important thing to remember with this, you can reverse your sprite when you do this. I'm lazy, so all I do is I invert my percentage. So to invert a percentage, all I'm doing is putting 1, so 1 is 100%, minus my value, which then returns the difference. So that gives me my negative value, basically, which means then it works. Then I've got x plus x1 and y plus y1 image scale, which is 1 and 1. This is set to 0. And then here, let me scroll over further, is I can set my colors in there, which is set in the image blend, and then I set my HP fade and my alpha. And then basically I set my health bar, and then my overlay, which then sets it to the correct output. My next setting is in my mana bar. I've just done a quick value in here, rather. So in my mana bar, I draw a square, like so, the same way as I did in the previous video, and then I draw an overlay on it just to give it the effect I'm looking for. The last one, which is the stamina bar, which is drawn completely by GameMaker code, which is basically just using some circles. I set a color in my circles, and then the colors dynamically change based on the amount of stamina I've got left. And then once they're used, they actually drop down to a smaller circle, as you can see, and it just staggers. So it's just based off of the stamina amount. And then the other weird thing here that you may notice is I've got draw set alpha, and then a draw set alpha in here, which just lets me set the amount of alpha for that section of code. And you'll see it again in here. I do it on the rectangle. So what do we get out of this? So when I run the program, if I run, you'll see my little stamina balls change colors, and they'll fade out on me as it regenerates. And if I run again, you can see that it regenerates. So it's important to remember design. So for example, something that may be a bit of a bad design is I can't see when my stamina is completely full. So you should bear that in mind when engineering these systems. I can use my mana, and as you can see, draws it there. And then if I get hit by the barrel, my health decreases. So the other side to this, and I'm just going to go into the barrel. I'm not going to show you guys how I program the barrel and that to behave, because that's going to be your fun little thing to do if you choose to. But under here, when the... no, not magic. When the player takes a hit, for example, I've just embedded 2 new values, which gives me a fade delay and a HP... HP fade sets it to 1 to indicate that you've been hit. So that's pretty much the tutorial.